And it was 2 days ago on April 4th, 2025, that I finished The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, which officially means that I have finished all of Mistborn, all 7 books that are out currently. Technically, I still need to read Secret History. Yes, that is actually going to be very important to this video that I haven't read Secret History, but I will be. I'll probably do it tomorrow, to be very honest. But Lost Metal, end of Mistborn Era 2. Jumping right into non-spoilers, because I actually do have a lot to say about this book. Um, the world building, a lot of the world building was played up in this book, so there's a lot more satisfaction, a lot of um, era development. I think one of the big things about Mistborn Era 2 is that it's the start of a technological era in the series, and without like giving too much away, this book really emphasizes the technological developments and the point of view of having the world changing around you, and really like Mistborn has come a long ways from the first book, and so this book really emphasizes how far humanity has come, or whatever the word is for their race of people, I guess, has come since the beginning. So world building is great. Overall, my personal opinion for Mistborn Era 2, there aren't really any good antagonists at any point. I never liked any of the antagonists in Era 2. I just reread all 3 books and then finished Lost Metal, and they're all just much weaker than, I guess, Sanderson's other antagonists in other series. I guess other series like Mistborn Era 1 don't quite have like a definitive antagonist. They have periodic antagonists as well, but like they still came across much stronger than Era 2. I think Era 2 just has so much focus on all these other things like the world building, the characters, um, magic, and these other developments that the antagonists just really fall short. Um, the best one is Shadows itself, without a doubt. Shadows itself is unbelievable, but it's still not even that strong for me. Like, I had a very strong impact, but it wasn't necessarily the antagonist being strong, it was the plot twist that was strong, not the antagonist. So I think overall, it's a bit weak. That's my opinion. I think this was like kind of like the grand finale of all of Era 2, right? And there's a lot of big things going on in this book, very important big things going on in this book, and yet it just it doesn't quite feel like it had anything to do with the antagonist, really. It more so had to do with the problem at large. So I just want to say that that fell a bit short for me, and that was one of the things that finally allowed me to put into words how I feel about Era 2. I couldn't place like some of the things that I didn't like, and I think that is one of the big ones. Let's see. Just like the rest of Era 2, this book really has a balance between some big fights, a lot of dialogue, a lot of the world building, as I previously mentioned, and also just absurd moments, and not even just Wayne moments, but just some crazy things that just happen because they just happen apparently. Um, this book really had a lot of each of those compared to the rest. And keep in mind, this book is longer than the rest of Era 2, so that's part of why. But there was just a lot of very different things. So there's a lot of different um, moods, a lot of different moods interspersed throughout this book. And sometimes it like jumps like very quickly from like happy, sad, weird, silly, happy again, very very sad again. It was jumping all over the place. Uh, Not necessarily a negative way. I'm not saying that as like I was upset that it felt like this, but I also want to say that it feels different than most other books I read. I realize that Dresden kind of does that, where it's very happy, joking, and then like he's very sad. But it, Dresden doesn't quite reach absurd, and I think that this book, Lost Metal in particular, just has some absurdity to it. It just feels a little silly at times. Um, I just want that to be out there. Um, Again, compared to the other ones, I have to say, no, we'll say that in spoilers. We'll say that in spoilers. I mean, it's not a spoiler, but we'll say it in spoilers anyway. Some important things to know going into Lost Metal. If you haven't read Lost Metal yet, but you have read the other three, and you waited like me, three big things to know. One, big time skip. There's a big time skip between the previous book and this book, and that adds a lot to this book. It is one of the reasons it feels very different is that so much time has passed. So, time skip, be aware of that. This is a huge Cosmere book, which is another reason why it's different than the rest of Era 2, and also why it's hard to really explain why this book feels so weird. This book is pretty much the first Mistborn book that really gets in the Cosmere at large. And it does a lot. I mean, a lot. This is a book that you definitely, in my opinion, would have wanted to read a lot of the rest of the Cosmere before you read this book. Um, I wish I read Elantris before I read this book, as well as Secret History. I wish I read both of those things, because both are relevant. So, and it's still readable without that, but I also feel like I missed a lot of the experience that a lot of the people who have read the things got when reading this book. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with grammar because it's midnight. But big Cosmere book, big Cosmere book. So if you're not really like reading Mistborn for the Cosmere, a lot of things might make no sense in this book. And I imagine that this book would be very discomforting if you never heard about any of these things before. Um, I think that is another reason why this book might feel weird, is it assumes you have outside knowledge, which I do. In most of the cases, there's a little bit of outside knowledge I didn't have, but just that little bit of knowledge I didn't have, I felt a little disoriented at times. I cannot imagine how disorienting this book would be if you had no Cosmere knowledge, if you just had only read Mistborn all the way through. Very important to know that this is a big Cosmere book. I know I said three things, but the third thing was the context of which ones I've read and which ones I haven't read, which we did. So, that's most of what I have for non-spoilers. A lot of the magic in the book is still Mistborn staple. Love that. There's a few new developments, and again, some Cosmere at large developments. But I've never disliked the magic. I still love it, in fact. So, not upset about that at all. And the characters, still lovable. Again, they were a little absurd or different at times, but overall, I love most of the characters. It's hard to dislike any of them, and all of them really got individual spotlights in this book, so that was actually very nice as well. Okay. With all that said, we'll get into spoilers, which I have a lot of notes for. There's just a lot of things I need to verbalize what I just read. So, please leave if you don't want spoilers for The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, 4th book of Mistborn Era 2, 7th book of the Mistborn overall series. Oh boy. Okay, let's start off with the beginning of the book. Wax has kids now. I did not expect that to jar me nearly as much as it did. I thought I would be able to just take it in stride, but like when that was revealed, I don't know why, I just really struggled to continue reading the book for a bit. Um, I I just I guess my image of Wax just got like completely morphed, and it was hard for me to put those two pieces together, that he had kids and was pretty much retired, and it had been 6 years that had passed, and he's just been raising kids during that time period. It just really caught me off guard. Um, so I was not prepared for that to be the beginning of the book at all. Um, Furthermore, I wasn't expecting Wayne to be like police partners with Marcy, um, or for Marcy to be dating Alec, and then also Wayne has been dating Milan. I guess I'm just going to use the word dating arbitrarily for 6 years, which I also would not have expected. I thought that was just going to be like a short term thing, but like all three characters have been in like committed relationships for 6 years, which is a lot of time. And there's a lot that can change and happen in 6 years. And at the beginning of this book, we start with a Wayne prologue, which was also new, different. I really liked it, actually. I really liked the Wayne prologue. But this book, Wayne just felt so different. And I think it is fitting, but also Wayne feels different because he's going through some emotional things, um, and so there's times it was very fitting, but there are other times where I'm like, what happened? I want to know like what further context got Wayne thinking these things, because throughout the book, this is my biggest like comment regarding this. Throughout the book, Wayne keeps referring to the story that his mom mentioned that was in the prologue, and I keep wondering, how did that story come to mind? Why that story in particular? I realize it's the last one before she died, but there isn't much of a justification or explanation on why that story came to mind and why he's sticking with it and why he's not explaining the story. He doesn't explain the story until the very end, really, in the grand scheme of things. Um, and so I'm just curious what started all of his thinking and what started him remembering his parents' death. There wasn't really an indicator saying that something reminded him of it or like something happened in the last 6 years to make him think about it. He just kind of was. So I was very curious about that. Um, but yeah, Wax retired with kids. Marcy and Wayne are police partners, and they go down and they do an operation after hiking through the mud. That was entertaining. I love Wayne just exploding the merchandise. Crazy. Don't know how he lived, but that's the way of Wayne. Uh, Fighting Spiked Person. That was pretty intense. That was a pretty big fight scene right off the bat, early in the book. So that got things running. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, Wax is like jumping over towers. Failed to pass the bill. Jumping over towers with his son on his chest and just flying, which by the way I think is cheating as a parenting method, but whatever. But just playing fetch, which is absolutely adorable. I have to say I did find that very cute. Um, and then they go up, and then there's like a new Malwish, yeah, a new Malwish ship coming in, and they have a new captain. That never really was important at any point in the book. Maybe it was just like a, oh, what's the word for that? Not misnomer. That means like wrongly named, but like a red herring. Is that the phrase? Just like something to trick you. But it really wasn't that important, except for the bands of mourning comment, and then the bands of mourning show up. Which, by the way, I had definitely thought several times in this book, hey, if the world's gonna end, I mean, if there's a time to use the bands of warning, I agree they shouldn't use it, but also if there's a time, they finally get it and it's empty. So I feel like that's the only time the plot point of the new ship coming in was really important at all, other than also to provide a way for the governor to evacuate, and then he doesn't because Steris asked him to stay. Like, that really didn't seem that important, but Wax identifies it at the beginning of the book, and then he goes back and gets a message from Marcy and Wayne that they found the spike. And so they take the Trellium, and they go down, and they do their experiment, and they boom, big boom, right? And they made different metals from the boom. I'm not quite sure the chemistry of what happened. It seems like two things happened. I'm not sure because like they made the metal that allows you to become a Mistborn again. Apparently, they made that. And apparently, um, Wax inhaled some of it, which is also apparently enough to just inhale it. And then furthermore, none of the other characters got it. Just Wax and Wayne. Well, just Wax. Wayne had to like pretty much burn it, which is interesting. I'm not sure what happened there. And then apparently also something. I reread this the end of the book where this was mentioned several times and I still don't know what happened. Either they made ATM or they made something that allows Marsh to keep living because apparently Marsh was dying. And I'm also curious why Marsh was running out at exactly however many years it's been since Era 1. But apparently Marsh was running out right around when all this plot was happening. And then they happened to make a solution during that explosion that wasn't the metal before. I don't know what happened. There's just a lot that happened there, and a lot of it was explained at the very end of the book, and this experiment at the very beginning of the book. So something happened. So some Sanderson magic happened, and apparently these chemical reactions are very strange. But given it is with magic metals, I'm not too surprised. Um, yeah. So that's that. And after that, that's when Wax is like, "All right, I'll play the game." And so Wax does the whole makes an earring, finds out that it's his sister, or he kind of already knew it would be his sister, but knows his sister's up to something. And that's really the antagonist that I'm most disappointed about. The sister, it's really hard to have a strong antagonist when you don't, especially in like book 4 of a series, when you don't know them. At no point in any of the 4 books did we really know Wax's sister. Wax kept saying, like, I knew her so well. But there is absolutely zero evidence that Wax knew her well at all. And in fact, I think he didn't, and he just kept telling himself that until he realized, oh, I don't really know her. But he keeps saying that, like, she changed a lot since they were kids. And again, we have nothing to compare to for that fact. So it just feels a little weak because we don't have much of her background or characterization or really understanding of who she is or where she came from or why she is the way she is, other than Sanderson just saying she has to be the best and thinks Wax is naive. Like, there's just a missing gap there. So, personal opinions. I wasn't a big fan of Wax's sister at all. We'll get to that. Marcy wants to do a sneak-in operation, right? That's what happens next. And along the way, she meets the Ghost Bloods, which we're going to talk about the Ghost Bloods. It's coming. But before then, we have Marcy's operation. Doing the operation, they get caught. There's the double operation thing, which you rarely get to see that in books, even though it's a pretty common trope. So I thought that was actually kind of entertaining. And yeah, that was kind of Marcy's fault for not telling the local police force in Bilming that they were going to do that. So there you go. But then there's the one guy with the spike of Dularium. Oh my god. Dulorium. You know which one I mean. I don't know why I can't remember how to pronounce it all of a sudden. That was very interesting because that metal has not been prominent in a long time. Don't know how they got it. Don't know how they made it. Whatever. But they did. So that was pretty powerful. And I think he was a very interesting antagonist for a while. Until we found out that it's just two people trying to be Wax and Wayne. Why? Why? At 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 no point in this book did that make any sense to me. It just felt absurd. It just felt absurd. Like they were claiming that it was so that they could be recognized by autonomy, but I do not understand how replacing someone by pretending to be them so well that you replace them, which by the way does not make logical sense, just as a sentence, would get the attention of autonomy? What? What? Like, especially the Wayne one. The Wayne one was just so over the top. And that was part of the point, was that it was so over the top that it was annoying Wayne. But like, why? There really wasn't much to gain out of that. For that character. That character just doesn't have, there's no way that would have worked, that it made any logical sense. And it also led them to do some like silly things. And they felt they thought that they had to fight their counterpart, which also was silly. All of that, I'm a bit miffed. Miffed is a bit too strong a word, but I just, by the like third fight of the pair against the pair, I was like, I'm done with this. I I am running out of patience for these two. Can y'all just kill them already? I just I got tired of that. I got really tired of that. Also, shocked that she survived her head blowing off, but you know, whatever. Also surprised that Wayne was able to survive a fall which was really high. I don't know how he had enough healing for a fall that high. So I'm also a little bit unsure about that, but yeah. So there's them. The 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 two people who are pretending to be Wax and Wayne. Those guys. They exist. The one who was Wax was interesting at first, and then it just fell down as the duo kept showing up over and over again, and I just lost patience for them. Anyway, he shows up during the whole operation. The operation goes bad, and that's when like things really start kicking off, right? Meanwhile, Marcy meets the Ghost Bloods. Now, I wasn't quite sure if it was going to be the Ghost Bloods or another group. It is the Ghost Bloods, and shockingly, by the way, caution for the next 5 minutes for Stormlight Archive spoilers if you haven't read Stormlight Archive. Shockingly, they let Marcy into the post, and I know Marcy like convinced them, but like it took way more effort for Shallan to get the attention of certain characters in Stormlight Archive to get the same information. They were way harder to convince in Stormlight Archive than they were in this book. In this book, they were just very forthcoming, and they really let a lot of stuff happen. And given that they broke open like the safes and everything for like all their stored up investiture, they broke open all their stored up investiture for this event. And I get this event is a pretty big problem. It could have taken out the planet. I get that. I understand that. But also, that is some really expensive material that they spent. Really expensive. And the points they spent it weren't actually points that really would have changed the plot much. I can't help but feel that there could have been a way for them to get Marcy where she needed to be without using 3 whole pots of investiture. 3. That's so much. Also, wondering what the fuck's going to come out of that operation at the end where they can just get pure investiture from anyone by sewing their skin. Crazy. We're going to get there. We'll get to the whole underground society and all of that. I really have a lot to talk about today. I have to rant about everything I just read because there's so much in this book, and they're all different kinds of flavors of interesting, unique, weird, etc., etc. So, okay. Operation goes bad. Meet the Ghost Bloods. Ghost Bloods invite her in. Get to see some cool stuff. We get to see someone who has some of the magics from Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is awesome. Huge fan of that. Wasn't expecting it, but he's not from the planet of Tress of the Emerald Sea. He's from another planet. So apparently there's duplicates, several planets with the same power. I don't know. I don't know. I'm confused. It's fine. He was cool. He was my favorite of the group. Um, I suspect I would have liked the girl that got Marcy in the first place more if I had read Elantris, but I hadn't, so I don't really know what's up with her, frankly. Um, so Marcy gets invited into Ghost Bloods, and she's working with the Ghost Bloods to get the governor or get the mayor to not summon an army, which, again, I don't still didn't know much about the mayor or his logic or why he was doing anything he was doing, so that was crazy. But he was like a big part of the plot and apparently worked with the set all along, so that's unfortunate. Um, Crazy. So all that's happening. Meanwhile, Wax and Wayne are hunting down the bomb, right? Which, by the way, there's a bomb, like a pretty much a nuke. There's some themes on nuclear warfare in this book because that was necessary in Mistborn. I'm not saying that in like a sardonic way. I'm saying that as in, holy shit, quite a thing to bring up. Um, Nuclear warfare, bomb. Don't even know how much of the planet will blow up. That's scary. So while Wax and Wayne are looking for that bomb, Hoyd, who's the coachman, is trying so hard to drive them around, and Wax just keeps avoiding him over and over and over again. So poor Hoyd in this book. He's trying his best. He gets his redemption at the end, but he really does nothing in this book, which I find very funny. At least nothing visible. But that's happening. There's this very epic chase scene where Wax is like flying over the city, finding all the cars, and then he like uses all of his weight, which I don't know if he stores up weight later, but he uses all of his weight and just like fucking demolishes this car. That was very cool. I was a huge fan of that scene. Loved that a lot. So that was very exciting. And then we go back to Marcy, who's now found the underground society, where there's a whole society that they took pictures, which by the way, I still don't know how they made those films or those pictures, because they don't have like editing software yet. They still would have had to film it. So I don't know how they did that other than with the model, but it still would have had to be like very fine, like mist and whatnot for the model. I don't know how they did it exactly per se, like scientifically, but they used film to show a bunch of these people that they kidnapped in the previous 3 books, mainly the first 2 books. Kidnapped in the first 2 books, showing all of them that the world above, outside of the cavern, has been pretty much like an apocalypse because the ash mounts have started again. And because these people aren't familiar with what film is, they're just like, oh my god, that's the outside. We all have to hide out here. And like they've pretty much just been metaphorically brainwashed over and over again, and like told that like if there's like any outsiders that they're like sick from the ash and whatnot. Crazy development. I was not expecting that at all. I totally thought that the point of all of those people being stolen was for breeding Mistborn. Turns out that is what that was for. It's just you get a bunch of people underground and you tell them that the world is burning above. It just happens to be a side effect. And to make it even worse, they're taking random ones to do experiments to get investiture from them. And maybe hemalurgy also, which is also really fucked up. So, whole underground society is insane. Everything related to that is crazy. That was like one of the most serious plot points of this book. Like really serious. Very serious. And so like when that was happening and then we get Wax and Wayne fighting their doubles, I'm just like, what a dichotomy going on in this book. It's just such a gap there. crazy. Crazy to me, personally. Um, Huge theme. I thought that was one of the biggest things of this book, really, other than the big bomb at the end, which also is crazy. We're gonna get there. I mean, I think that's probably my next point. Hold on, let me catch up on all my. A note I wrote, and I do think this is kind of true. This is my problem with Maricy's plotline. The Ghostbloods kind of upstaged the book a little bit. Like the underground plot, which was part of like the main 4 books, but also the Ghostbloods really just they're the ones who made Maricy's whole plot line happen. And so they kind of took up a big part of the book, really. By the way, I've skipped Steris entirely. Steris isn't doing too much, let's be honest. Though, I will say it's very endearing to see someone with AUDHD figuring out that sometimes the overplanning and overthinking is beneficial, and I'm glad that she's able to figure that out. And I felt a little bit called out by it, so that's happening on the Sterisy front. Um, but yeah, I think the Ghostbloods upstaged the book a little bit, at least particular points. There's still some like great moments with Wax and Wayne. Obviously, love them. And Maricy had a lot of her moments, a lot of her logic. But I feel like you would also think that the Ghostbloods would have been able to figure out a lot of these things themselves. I feel like the Ghostbloods, in my mind, was a much more powerful society than this book paints them. And so I'm a bit confused about that. But that is what the Mistborn Era 3 will be about, so I'm sure it'll be explained then. Blah, blah, blah. Alright, anyway, continuing. We're almost there. We're getting there. Back to Wax and Wayne. Wax needs to attack his sister, apparently. And he's trying to find the bomb. So he realizes that because they didn't have enough time for the bomb, they're going to put it on the tallest tower to make it in range. Turns out psych, but we'll get there. Tallest tower. So they go up the tallest tower, and there's just hundreds of soldiers there, and Wax breaks out the grenade launcher, which, by the way, that was the most obvious, what's it called? The something, Chekhov's gun. That's the most obvious Chekhov's gun in the fucking world, Sanderson. You could have been a little bit more subtle about that, but anyway, breaks out the grenade launcher, and he's just shrapneling everybody. So they just get completely fucked over. And then at the very top, Wayne does his, you should really leave, which I think was also overdone a little bit. I think just, 1 or 2 probably would have been enough, but whatever. Get up to the top. Wax's sister's there. She's monologuing. She's such a monologuing villain. Again, another reason I might not like her at all. And then Wax realizes that it's still not the real missile, and so the whole conversation is kind of just pointless. There's really nothing really there. So really the big point of being there was that Wax and Wayne had to kill their doubles, right? And so they kill their doubles after a lot of effort. It takes quite a bit. Kill their doubles, they're having that conversation, and Wax realizes it's on a boat. And so they're looking at the boats and trying to figure out how the hell they can get to the boats with no healing left or anything else. And Wax is like, we could steal their spikes. And so Wax spikes himself, but he happened to read the book that he got from Marsh so well that he knew how to do it properly. So he spiked himself with Dularium. You know what I mean. I'm struggling with that one today. So that he can just he just became a missile himself, really, and just flew over the whole city. By the way, don't know how they didn't die on impact in the water, because that is... Water does a lot of damage to you if you launch, full on. And I don't know what they slowed themselves on. They could have slowed themselves on the boat, but I feel like the boat would have, So, a little bit of physics up in the air for that sequence, which Sanderson's usually really good with physics, so that's why I'm pointing out that I don't know how the hell they did that. launches himself like a missile to go get the missile, right? And gets on the boat, and you have the perspective of the one guy on the boat. I did kind of like that, just a little tiny interlude sprinkled in there. Um, so there's that. They go in, they find out that all the bombs are linked to each other, which makes sense. And they're trying to figure out how to get around it. And Wayne is like, speed bubble. And it's like, oh god, here we go. And so Wayne realizes what he needs to do, and he launches Wax off the boat, which that was glorious. I loved that. I really, really liked that. Apparently, Wax broke his leg being launched off the boat into the water, or he broke his leg earlier. I was very confused on when the leg was broken, but at this point, I was at the very end of the book, so I was just finishing the book. So, I'm not sure what was going on there. Oops. But Wayne is like, I gotta do the speed bubble. And it's like a very intense moment because like Wayne just signed up to sacrifice himself. It's a little diminished by how they have to explain that. Like, I feel it was pretty obvious that that was what was going to happen, but Sazed and Wayne really get into this technological talk of like how it works and whatnot, and it kind of weakened the moment a little bit because it just got too technologically forward. But Wayne does it, and he go boom, and then he has a talk with Sazed in the afterlife, which is interesting, and he was Wayne. Also, side note, I missed something way, way, way earlier. Wayne being rich was very funny. I was a big fan of Rich Wayne. That was funny. Big fan. Him investing in all the things that would exactly be the things to invest in. Very funny. He could have Robin Hooded that shit so good. Anyway, Wayne goes boom. One of the other biggest moments of this book. And pretty much from there, it goes straight into epilogue, except for one detail. Hoyd shows up on a boat and rescues Wax from the waters. Who in the hell knows how Hoyd knew he was there? No one knows. Typical Hoyd moment. So Hoyd finally gets his moment, and then we go straight into the epilogues. This book has 7 epilogues. 7. I don't think I've ever read a book with more than one epilogue until this book. This book has 7 epilogues, one for a lot of different characters. I don't have much to say about most of them. I do love the interchangeable hat for Wayne's statue. That was awesome. I think my biggest note for the epilogue is Kel's epilogue. Kelsier. Kelsier is still Kelsier. Again, I haven't read Secret History, but I don't need Secret History to know he has not changed. And I have never liked him. I don't know what was up with that, but if you go back to my Final Empire book discussion, I kind of point out that I wasn't a big fan of Kelsier, and I'm really not. In fact, I kind of hate Kelsier a little bit. There's like maybe dislike is a better word. I dislike Kelsier. I just do. A lot of people love him so much, and I just didn't like him. And this book, in particular, really gave me reasons why. A lot of his logic and thinking is so limited. It's so short point of view, and it's very much linked to his bias / prejudices as a previous Mistborn. I think the fact that he had Mistborn powers before he died made him really think that there's superiority in people with allomancy. And he just cannot accept that other things can, make people just as powerful or whatnot. So he pretty much is also just talking about eugenics at the end of the book in his epilogue. And Sazed flat out tells him, like, there's repercussions, don't do that. And he's like, I'm going to do what needs to be done, and we need Mistborn, and so we're going to make it happen. And I just was like, wow. He pretty much was flat out saying that people who aren't Mistborn or Allomancers are useless to society, when you really look at what he was getting at. So, yeah, I'm not a Kelsier fan. I've never been a Kelsier fan. I'm very much against his way of thinking, and I'm worried about how his way of thinking have influenced things over the however many years has passed since Mistborn Era 1. Also, he said that there's 3 of them left. I think Marsh said that there's 3 of them left. Is that right? 3? Because wouldn't Tensoon count? It'd be Tensoon, Sazed, Marsh, and Kelsier. Unless Tensoon doesn't count, then it would be 3. But I really thought Tensoon would count. I don't know what's going on there. Also, Milan broke up with Wayne. Really wasn't a big deal at the beginning of the story. That really wasn't what was really bothering Wayne or whatnot. Though it sounded very, it sounded like Wayne played a little bit of sexuality, so that's kind of cool. But that was just all implications. Alright. I think that was all I had for spoilers. Also, my throat's starting to dry up, so I think that's all I have for spoilers. Crazy book. I loved a lot of parts. I was hands in the air about some other parts. Crazy book. That's really all I have to say about Lost Metal. I have nothing more. Alright, we get into what's new and what is next, which is a great question. This marks me finishing the 3rd Sanderson series I have ever finished. Technically, if you include Warbreaker as like another series, it's 4. So, it's been a long time since I finished a series. The last series I finished, other than, I'm saying outside of Sanderson, because I finished Stormlight Archive and Mistborn Era 2 this year. I think the last series I finished was The Expanse, and that still was years ago now. I think I finished The Expanse my sophomore year. So it's been a while, and it feels very weird to have finished 2 very pivotal series in my to-be-read list, and now have to pick what is next. I know I've talked about this the last few videos, but I'm still struggling to figure out what I'm going to do. I was going to reread, and may still reread, Traitor's Blade. The only reason I say it the way I did is that I did start the audiobook, but I'm unsure if it's me not liking the narrator or me just not liking the prologue. I think it's just me not liking the prologue. There's the beginning of this quote, or the beginning of this book is a quote about, like, what if you had the job that you always wanted? And it's a common theme throughout this book, and compared to real life, I think that falls short. There's just not strong enough characterization for it being his, like, the job he always wanted. It feels a little silly, personally, but it's also because I know how this book goes, and I know I'm not the biggest fan of this book. So it's hard to reread a book that I know I didn't like the ending. But I also know I like the characters and I like the idea, and I want the rest of the books to be good. So that's why I'm debating rereading it. So, may reread, unsure. More importantly, we have 4 series that I think are the front runners right now. That may be the next series I read. In order, you can see the first one. We have The Thousand Names. This is a series that my friend has wanted me to read for a long time. He is a fan of a lot of military fantasy, Stormlight Archive, as well as Powder Mage. I liked Powder Mage more than him, but I love Powder Mage. So, this is military fantasy. The issue with this series, and I don't know why, it's hard to get access to. These books are hard to find. I don't know why, especially the audiobooks. A lot of the audiobooks just don't exist on pretty much any platform I've looked at. So the biggest thing about this book is just having access to the books. There are 5 books in the series. The series is called Shadow Campaigns, if you want to look at it. Apparently, this is a really, really good book. So, I might read this even if I can't get access to the rest of the series. We'll see. What's the font size look like? It's a little small. Thousand Names. Next, we have a very, very famous one. We have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I need to get more female readers on my shelf, or female authors on my shelf, or under my reading list. So, Robin Hobb. This would technically be a 9-book commitment if I am doing all of them. If not, it's the trilogy, Farseer Trilogy. This is the first book of the Farseer Trilogy. My thinking is that if I'm reading Robin Hobb, I'm probably going to do all of it. But I don't know that until I read Farseer. But everything I've ever heard about this series has been like all praise. So I have very little doubt. I think people love this series, so that's why I'm tempted to dive into this. I'm just a little scared about 9 books. You know, it's a lot of books. Next up, I did not think this would be on the list, but I did some research. I have the Sun Eater series, which the first book is Empire of Silence, by Christopher Rocchio, written by Christopher Rocchio as a potential option for a new series. The last book of Sun Eater comes out this fall. And so because it has a final date, it means that this is a candidate for a series I can read. It's also a strong candidate because this is sci-fi. In fact, it's space opera, very particular. These are both fantasy. Stormlight Archive, fantasy. Mistborn, fantasy. We've been reading a lot of fantasy. So this would be another sci-fi series, which the only sci-fi series I've ever read on this channel was The Expanse. The reason I'm scared of this series is that it has a lot of world building and languages. Apparently there's like languages that the author completely developed. Several languages the author completely developed in the series. So I'm a little bit worried about readability. And also, this is a very hard edition to read because it's so thick. I don't like when they're chonky like this. So, we'll see if the audiobook narrator is good. This may be an option. 7 books commitment. And then lastly, we have another big military fantasy, Malice by John Gwen, which I've also wanted to read for a long time. A long time. Technically, First Law is also an option, but I decided I want to read this before First Law. I want to read this series. The name of the series is Faithful and the Fallen. I really want to read this series. Technically, it'd be a 4-book commitment for Faithful and the Fallen. But just like Powder Mage, it has a sequel series. And if there's anything I've learned from Mistborn and Powder Mage, it's that I want to read the sequel series right after I read the main series. Because having that time gap like I had, it just makes it difficult. So I think from now on, I'm making a rule to myself to do all of it in one go. So that means this is a 7-book commitment, because the sequel series is a trilogy, I believe. So while I have the 4 Faithful and the Fallen books, and I own 1 of the sequel series books, I still have to get 2 of the other ones. So that's the main thing. I also don't know if the audiobook narrator is good for this. Malice is a book I feel like I'd want to read the actual physical book. So this might be a summer endeavor just because I want to read the physical book. It has very large font. So it'd be very doable. But heard fantastic things about this series as well. I've been excited for this for a long time, so I really want to do this. And then after I finish this, First Law will be on the table, so we can read some morally gray, grimdark men. Red Rising will eventually be on the table as well, but the last book is not out yet. So not yet. We're waiting. So these are all the books that I am considering, or all the series really, that I'm considering moving forward. I have to read a book for class, but I think I'm going to do The Expanse. I think I mentioned that before. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. But these are the series that are currently in the running. We will see who wins. We'll see who wins. I have no new books. I'm actually about to order some new books, though. So soon, but not yet. And that's it. I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you all at some point, perhaps after graduation, and if so, I'll probably have an update. Bye.